So firstly, I just want to say apologies for the lack of regular videos recently. This time of year tends to be really busy for me, so I am hoping to get back to regular updates very shortly. What I want to talk to you about today is, once again, the Star Wars fandom being a little upset over something inconsequential. And with the Acolyte coming up in the next few months, there's been more and more articles, more interviews, more details of the show being revealed. And there's been an interview in the last couple of days of Entertainment Weekly with Daphne Keane, who is one of the stars in the show. And it has again upset that certain element of the Star Wars fandom that just likes to be upset for any reason. And it is confusing to me because it's something that, A, doesn't make sense from a logical perspective to be upset about. And it's something that I think they've been asking for the longest time. So in this article, Daphne Keane goes into detail about how the Acolyte is seeking to top the fight at the end of the Phantom Menace between Maul, Obi-Wan and Qui-Gon, one of the most well-known and well-loved lightsaber fights in the entire saga. Now, personally, I'm not one that overly enjoys the prequel style of fights. I much prefer the intense emotion of the Luke versus Vader, or the subtle kind of meaning behind a Maul versus Obi-Wan in Rebels. I connect with fights on a much deeper level than just the flashy moves, but that's not to take any credit away from that fight itself. I think it is an extremely well choreographed fight. The visuals are fantastic, and the skill that goes into preparing for a scene like that is just immense. And so with the show trying to claim that it wants to top this fight, it's gotten a certain section of fans upset because they're saying that it's very much a place of arrogance to believe that you can top a fight like the Duel of the Fates. And speaking of Duel of the Fates, someone mentioned on Twitter the other day that without John Williams' soundtrack, that fight becomes much less, impactful. And I tend to agree. I think that one of the most recognisable elements of that fight is the soundtrack. And you take that away, and can the fight stand up by itself? I'm not so certain. It's a minor point, but I think it's an important one just to point out that the choreography isn't everything when it comes to a fight scene like this. It's all the elements together. The choreography, the emotion, the soundtrack, the visuals, the setting, they all go and combine together to make a fantastic fight scene. So they're upset because they don't like the idea that something, I guess, produced by Disney or produced by a woman could possibly top what is held, in very high regard. Because, again, people have different styles that they like, and I understand that the idea that something could be better than something that you hold on to so dear is a little upsetting. It damages the ego. But at the end of the day, is that not really what we're trying to do here? Are we not trying to make something better than what's come before? That's the confusing element for me. It's something that I don't quite understand why you would want something to not be as good as what we've had previous. Would you not want The Empire Strikes Back to be better than A New Hope? And so I've seen some specific arguments, again, that no one but Nick Gillum can do, the fight scenes. It's a bit of an unusual argument because, again, imagine George Lucas directing The Empire Strikes Back. He would not have been as good as Irvin Kershner. But if you made those protests and George ended up doing it, you never get Empire Strikes Back in the way that we had it, being the best, in my opinion, the best Star Wars film. So the arguments don't make sense, and I feel like, this is just, again, that element of the fandom being upset for the sake of being upset. It also doesn't make sense because what a lot of them have been clamouring for is these more intense and complicated and better fight scenes. A lot of them seem to really enjoy lightsaber duels, and that's fair. If that's your cup of tea, that's your cup of tea, more power to you. But when they've not been getting these fights, and certainly throughout the sequel trilogy, there was a lot of complaints about the saber sequences. Again, I liked the fight at the end of the Force Awakens in the forest between, firstly, Finn and Kylo, and then Rey and Kylo. I loved the snow setting, the darkness, the way the blades illuminated, the emotion behind the fight. You know, again, not everyone's cup of tea, but I really, really enjoyed that fight. The fight in The Last Jedi between, you know, Rey, Kylo, and the Praetorian Guard, really well choreographed. Again, great visuals, you know, an enjoyable scene. And then, you know, I think The Rise of Skywalker is probably the weakest film when it comes to lightsaber duels, because we didn't necessarily, outside of that Death Star sequence, get much in the way of a lightsaber duel. And, you know, again, it wasn't necessarily my cup of tea. So you would think that they, after having all those complaints about the lack of decent lightsaber fights, they would welcome the idea that someone could top the very best that we've had to offer so far. But again, I think just because of the politics around the show itself, because of the beliefs of some of these people, and the fact that they just will not enjoy anything Disney makes, they're going to complain. You know, it could well be. If this turns out to be even better than that fight in The Phantom Menace, and 90% of the fandom agree, that 10% probably would disagree based purely on principle alone, because they can't stand the idea that something Disney does could be better than something that came before. And I think that's quite a sad and fragile, you know, attitude to have. It is very much, I think, about ego. Not being able to admit that something that you believe in is wrong, you know, or something that you have held in high regard might not be the best thing ever. It does say to me that there are some fragile egos at play here. So that's been the interesting take of the week in the Star Wars fandom. You know, again, just a small snippet of an interview that has unfortunately caused a little bit of uproar. And again, it is mostly the verbal minority online. I think, you know, again, 95% of Star Wars fans could not care less as to, firstly, the claims that the fight in the Acolyte is going to be better than in the Phantom Menace. And if it does turn out to be better, I think 95% of people will be happy for that, because they want something better. Why do you not want something better? Is it because it's Disney? And you might have to say, actually, I was wrong to think that Disney couldn't make something as good as what George Lucas made, you know? Because then does that make you feel bad because you've invested all of your ego and all of your pride into being anti-Disney? You know, I'm not a Disney shill by any, you know, stretch of the imagination. My thoughts on things that Disney have done vary wildly. I've enjoyed a lot of the stuff they've done. Other stuff I've really disagreed with and not liked. You know, for me, it's just they are very inconsistent in their storytelling. They rush things out. You know, sometimes they hit the mark, sometimes they don't. And, you know, I've explained my feelings on both this and my main channel many, many times. So I'm not an you know, kind of huge defender of Disney, but I will defend common sense. And I will defend against people who have an arrogant ego, or who grift. That's the word I think we should look for here. I think it's people looking for an opportunity to show off their ego and grift at the same time that are having a problem with this. So by all means, I want this fight, or, you know, however many fights there are in the Acolyte, I want them to be better. I want every show that comes afterwards to be better than the Acolyte. I want everything that comes afterwards to be better than the original trilogy, because ultimately, why would you not? Why would you not want things to be better? There's no point. If we have already reached the peak of Star Wars, what is the point in continuing it? And I know a few people will say, well, there's money to be made, and that might be Disney's perspective. But from a fan's point of view, we obviously should only be hoping for the best content possible. And if the actors in the show are saying we're trying to give you things that are better, what's the problem? I don't get it. But anyway, that's what's been happening this week. As I say, I'm keeping my eye on things. I'm going to have a review out for The Bad Batch Season 3 coming up as the show finishes. We have Tales of the Empire coming up after that, which I will be reacting to on the channel, so do subscribe if you haven't. In the meantime, thank you for watching. Let me know what you think of this whole mess in the comments, and I will see you for the next video.